The message arrived at exactly 3:17 Galactic Standard Time. It bypassed military firewalls that had never been breached. It ignored encryption systems developed across 6,000 years of technological progress. It slipped through every layer of security surrounding the Imperial core and appeared simultaneously on thousands of government screens spread across hundreds of worlds. At first, nobody understood what they were looking at. The message contained no image, no signature, no source code, no recognizable transmission pattern. Just a single sentence. Your extinction date has been scheduled. For nearly 12 seconds, nobody moved. Inside the Hall of Dominion, where the rulers of the Imperium governed the largest civilization in known space, the silence felt unnatural. Then the laughter started. It began with one minister. Then another. Within moments, the entire chamber erupted. Some laughed because the threat was absurd. Others laughed because they assumed it was a prank. A few laughed because fear often disguised itself as amusement. The Imperium had ruled for almost 4,000 years. Entire species had surrendered at the mention of its name. Star systems paid tribute without being asked. Governments collapsed when Imperial fleets merely entered orbit. Nobody threatened the Imperium. Nobody. Yet the message remained on every screen. Unchanged. Waiting. As if it knew something they didn't. Supreme Chancellor Varric eventually raised a hand and the laughter died. Trace it. The order was simple. The response should have been simple too. Instead, intelligence officers spent the next 17 minutes staring at their consoles in growing confusion. The signal existed. But it shouldn't. Every attempt to identify its origin produced contradictory results. One scan suggested it came from beyond known space. Another indicated it originated inside the imperial capital itself. A third somehow pointed toward an empty region where no stars existed. The algorithms began disagreeing with one another. Then they began crashing. By the 23rd minute, 3 separate intelligence networks had shut themselves down entirely. Nobody understood why. That was when the first unease entered the room. Not because of the threat. Because of the impossibility. Finally, a junior analyst spoke. His voice shook. We found a consistent origin point. The chamber turned toward him. The young analyst swallowed. There is only one location that appears in every surviving dataset. The giant holographic display shifted. A small blue sphere appeared above the center of the hall. Several ministers frowned. A few looked genuinely confused. One had to ask what planet they were looking at. The analyst answered quietly. Earth. The room became silent again. Earth. Humanity. A minor civilization from a distant sector. A species barely relevant to imperial strategic planning. Humans traded. Humans negotiated. Humans explored. They were known mostly for science initiatives and disaster relief missions. Certainly not threats. Certainly not conquerors. Certainly not the authors of extinction notices. The laughter returned, but this time it sounded weaker. Forced. Uncertain. Because another question had appeared. If humanity wasn't powerful enough to make the threat, then who was? The answer should have arrived moments later. Instead, something else happened. Across 17 Imperial frontier systems, military outposts stopped responding. No distress calls. No battle reports. No emergency transmissions. One moment they existed. The next they were gone. Not destroyed. Not attacked. Simply absent. As if someone had reached into reality and removed them. When rescue fleets arrived, they found empty stations drifting through space. No bodies. No weapons fire. No signs of struggle. Only one thing remained behind. The same sentence repeated on every abandoned screen. Your extinction date has been scheduled. And for the first time in 4,000 years, the Imperium stopped laughing. For the next 36 hours, the Imperium did what it had always done when confronted with uncertainty. It searched for an enemy. Thousands of intelligence officers were reassigned. Surveillance networks expanded. Trade routes were monitored. Communications across the frontier were intercepted and analyzed. Nothing. There were no invasion fleets. No hidden armadas. No secret alliances. No signs that any known civilization had suddenly developed the power to challenge the Imperium. The 17 vanished outposts remained a mystery. The personnel stationed there had simply disappeared. Every ship, every officer, every soldier, gone. The only evidence they had ever existed was the equipment left behind. And the message. Always the message. Meanwhile, Earth's representatives appeared genuinely confused. Human diplomats cooperated with every inquiry. They opened communication channels, shared records, allowed inspections, even offered technical assistance. The more Imperial investigators examined humanity, the less threatening humans appeared. Their military was relatively small compared to galactic powers. Their territory occupied only a fraction of one spiral arm. They possessed no known planet-killer weapons, no legendary warrior caste, no history of galactic conquest. In fact, humanity's record looked almost disappointing. They spent more resources on scientific research than military expansion. They funded exploration missions into uncharted regions. They frequently provided humanitarian aid to species that could offer nothing in return. Several Imperial officials began arguing that Earth was being framed, that some unknown enemy was using humanity as a distraction. The theory gained popularity quickly. It was comforting, because the alternative was ridiculous. Yet comfort rarely survives contact with reality. 3 days after the transmission, a deep space listening station near the edge of Imperial territory detected something unusual. Not a fleet, not a weapon, a pattern. A repeating mathematical sequence buried inside the background radiation of space itself. Scientists initially dismissed it as interference. Then they noticed something strange. The sequence wasn't random. It was counting. Nobody knew what it was counting toward, or why. But every 6 hours, the pattern changed, advancing one step closer to something. When analysts compared the sequence with the original transmission, they discovered both signals shared the same digital signature. Someone wanted the Imperium to notice. Someone wanted them watching. The discovery reached Supreme Chancellor Varric during an emergency session. The room was filled with admirals, ministers, economists, and military strategists. For once, nobody laughed. Because uncertainty was spreading. Not fear. Not yet. Just uncertainty. And uncertainty was dangerous. Find whoever is doing this, Varric ordered. Immediately. The order triggered the largest intelligence operation in Imperial history. Entire spy networks were activated. Sleeper agents embedded across hundreds of worlds received emergency directives. Data archives were reopened. Ancient records were examined. And somewhere inside those records, a forgotten name surfaced. Dr. Elias Kane. A human. Dead for nearly 2 centuries. At first, nobody understood why the archives flagged him. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a military commander. He wasn't even famous. He had been a theoretical systems analyst from Earth's early expansion era. Most of his work involved long-term risk assessment, predictive modeling, civilization survival scenarios. Boring subjects. At least they appeared boring until investigators discovered his final publication. The document had been classified by humanity almost immediately after release. The title alone caused concern. On the statistical inevitability of first contact wars. Imperial analysts translated the document. Then translated it again. Then a third time. Because they couldn't believe what they were reading. 200 years before meeting a single alien civilization, Kane had predicted that humanity would eventually encounter an expansionist empire. He had estimated likely political structures, military behaviors, economic patterns, psychological tendencies, even probable invasion strategies. Many of his predictions matched the Imperium with unsettling accuracy. Not perfectly, but close enough to make experienced intelligence officers uncomfortable. One analyst described the document as feeling less like a prediction and more like a reconnaissance report. The discovery sparked immediate debate. Some claimed it was coincidence. Others called it statistical genius. But one question lingered. If a human scientist had predicted an empire like the Imperium 2 centuries earlier, what else had he predicted? The answer emerged from a hidden section of the archives. A section even many human governments had apparently forgotten existed. Attached to Kane's work was a proposal. Not for a weapon. Not for a military alliance. Something far stranger. A project. One that had never officially existed. One that carried a simple designation. Contingency 0. The file itself was inaccessible. Every attempt to open it triggered security failures. The data appeared corrupted. Almost intentionally corrupted. But one surviving sentence remained visible. Just one. Enough to make the room fall silent. If the invasion ever comes, preparation must begin long before the enemy arrives. Nobody knew what Contingency 0 was. Nobody knew whether it had ever been implemented. Nobody knew who had access to it. But as intelligence officers searched deeper, another report arrived from the frontier. Then another. Then another. Entire monitoring stations were beginning to vanish. Not dozens. Hundreds. And every disappearance followed the same pattern. No battle. No warning. No evidence. Just empty structures drifting through space. As though something was moving through Imperial territory completely unseen. Watching. Measuring. Waiting. And for the first time, Supreme Chancellor Varric found himself staring at the holographic image of Earth and asking a question he never thought possible. Not whether humanity was responsible, but whether humanity had known this was coming all along. And light years away, hidden beneath layers of forgotten encryption buried deep within Earth's oldest data vaults. Something quietly woke up. The activation occurred at 2:04 Universal Earth Time. No alarms sounded. No satellites shifted position. No military units mobilized. From the outside, nothing happened at all. Yet buried beneath layers of forgotten infrastructure scattered across Earth, Mars, Luna, and dozens of remote colonies, systems that had remained dormant for almost 2 centuries quietly came online. Most of humanity didn't know they existed. Many governments didn't know they existed. Even the presidents, prime ministers, and planetary administrators of Earth were unaware of their full purpose. The systems had been designed that way. Compartmentalized. Hidden. Waiting. Not for a specific enemy. For a specific condition. And according to their programming, that condition had finally been met. Thousands of encrypted servers began exchanging information at speeds that defied conventional networking theory. Data flowed between colonies separated by light years with impossible efficiency. Ancient predictive models were awakened. Dormant simulations resumed processing after centuries of silence. A single directive spread across the network. Contingency 0 status. Active. Nobody publicly announced it. No emergency broadcasts appeared. Life across human space continued normally. People went to work. Children attended school. Cargo ships crossed trade routes. Restaurants opened. Factories operated. Human civilization looked completely calm. Which made what happened next even stranger. Because while humanity remained calm, the Imperium became increasingly nervous. The disappearances continued. 27 outposts. Then 43. Then 71. Entire monitoring networks simply vanished. Imperial fleets searched desperately for evidence of an attack. They found none. No wreckage. No debris. No radiation signatures. Nothing. It was as if the missing installations had been erased from reality. Military commanders hated mysteries. Mysteries couldn't be bombarded. They couldn't be blockaded. They couldn't be negotiated with. And the mystery surrounding humanity was growing larger every day. Then came the first survivor. The discovery happened near a remote gas giant in the outer territories. A damaged Imperial patrol ship emerged from hyperspace barely holding itself together. Its engines were failing. Its crew was traumatized. Its captain was unconscious. When rescue teams boarded the vessel, they immediately noticed something wrong. Every surveillance recording had been deleted. Every navigation log was corrupted. Every external sensor archive was missing. Only a single file remained. One video, 23 seconds long. Intelligence officers watched it repeatedly. The footage showed the bridge of the patrol vessel. Everything appeared normal. Then every screen aboard the ship suddenly turned black. A few seconds later, white text appeared. The same sentence. The same impossible message. Your extinction date has been scheduled. Crew members could be heard shouting. Then the cameras captured something even stranger. A shadow. Not a person. Not a ship. Just a shape moving across the stars outside the vessel. For less than half a second. Then the recording ended. No explanation. No context. Nothing. The footage spread rapidly through Imperial command circles. Nobody could identify the object. Analysis teams enlarged the image thousands of times. Results only created more confusion. The shape appeared too large to be a fighter. Too small to be a fleet. Its dimensions changed depending on which frame analysts examined. Some reports concluded it wasn't a physical object at all. Others insisted it had to be. The arguments became increasingly heated. And while the Imperium argued, someone else was watching. Deep beneath Antarctica, hidden inside a facility that officially did not exist, an elderly woman stood before a wall of glowing displays. Dr. Maya Chan had spent 40 years working on projects that could never be publicly acknowledged. She had anticipated this moment her entire life. Yet even she looked unsettled. Not because the plan was failing. Because it was succeeding faster than expected. The numbers scrolling across her screens made little sense. Predictive pathways were collapsing. Probability trees were converging. Future outcomes were narrowing. And that should have been impossible. Contingency Zero had never been intended to produce certainty. It had been built to manage uncertainty. Yet somehow uncertainty itself was disappearing. A younger analyst approached her station. We've confirmed another convergence. Maya didn't answer immediately. She continued staring at the projections. How many now? The analyst hesitated. 212. For the first time all day, Maya frowned. That number was wrong. Dangerously wrong. Because according to the original models, reaching that level of convergence should have required years. Not days. Something was accelerating events. Something neither humanity nor the Imperium fully understood. And that realization frightened her more than any alien fleet ever could. Meanwhile, far beyond Imperial borders, a classified expedition team made an extraordinary discovery. The team had been investigating one of the abandoned outposts. Most expected another empty station. Another dead end. Instead they found a message. Not electronic. Physical. Carved directly into reinforced metal. The markings appeared recently made. As if someone had wanted them found. Imperial investigators immediately secured the area. The inscription contained only 12 words. 12 words that would soon become the most discussed sentence in the galaxy. You are looking for an enemy. We are looking for a future. No signature accompanied the message. No explanation followed. Just those 12 words. Simple. Cryptic. Disturbing. Because for the first time, the question was changing. The Imperium no longer wondered whether humanity was involved. The evidence increasingly suggested they were. The real question had become far more dangerous. What exactly had humanity been preparing for during the last 200 years? And why did it seem as though they expected the Imperium to arrive? Far beneath Antarctica, Dr. Maya Chen finally received a report she had hoped would never come. The notification appeared in red. One sentence. Short. Urgent. Impossible. Her eyes widened. Then she immediately ordered every room cleared. Because according to the alert, someone had just accessed the deepest layer of Contingency Zero. Someone who was never supposed to know it existed. And the access request hadn't come from Earth. It had come from inside the Imperium itself. For 13 minutes, nobody spoke inside the Antarctic facility. The alert remained frozen on the central display. Dr. Maya Chen read it again. Then again. The words did not change. Unauthorized access detected. Source. Imperial Core Network. That wasn't possible. Contingency Zero had never been connected to alien systems. It had never been connected to any external system at all. The project had been designed specifically to prevent this exact scenario. For an outsider to access even the outer layers required knowledge that only a handful of humans possessed. To reach the deepest layer, someone would need to know secrets that had been buried for generations. Which meant one of two things. Either humanity had suffered the greatest intelligence breach in its history, or something far stranger was happening. Maya immediately ordered a full trace. The results arrived 6 minutes later, and somehow made everything worse. The access wasn't coming from a spy. It wasn't coming from a hacker. It wasn't coming from an Imperial Intelligence Division. The source identifier pointed toward a single individual. One person. One account. One user. The account name appeared on the screen. The room went silent, because the name belonged to a dead man. Elias Kane, the founder of Contingency Zero, the architect of the entire project, dead for almost 2 centuries. Yet according to the system logs, someone using his credentials had just entered the deepest section of the network. Maya felt cold. Not afraid. Just deeply unsettled. Because she knew something nobody else in the room knew. Elias Kane had left behind instructions. Thousands of instructions. Millions of pages of projections. But there was one file nobody had ever been allowed to open. Not even her. The file carried a lock that could only be removed under one condition. The condition was listed in Kane's own handwriting. Open only when the enemy begins asking the wrong questions. For 200 years nobody understood what that meant. Now Maya wasn't so sure. Meanwhile, on the Imperial capital world, Supreme Chancellor Varric was losing control of the narrative. The public knew something was wrong. Officially, nothing had happened. Unofficially, everyone knew entire military installations were disappearing. Trade networks had begun reporting strange delays. Insurance corporations were quietly raising risk assessments. Investors were moving assets. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some claimed humanity possessed invisible fleets. Others believed an ancient species had returned from extinction. A few insisted the Imperium had already lost a secret war nobody knew existed. The uncertainty was becoming poisonous. Then another impossible event occurred. An Imperial intelligence facility located 3,000 light-years from Earth received a transmission. Unlike the first message, this one contained no threat, no countdown, no warning, only a list. A list of names. 217 names. Every name belonged to an Imperial operative. Every operative was undercover. Every identity was classified at the highest level. Many had spent decades embedded inside foreign governments. Some were among the most valuable intelligence assets the Imperium possessed. The transmission identified all of them. Perfectly. Addresses. Aliases. Locations. Everything. The message ended with a single sentence. They should go home now. Panic spread through intelligence headquarters. Emergency recalls were issued immediately. Within 48 hours, over 80% of the listed agents vanished. Not killed. Not captured. They simply resigned. Walked away. Defected. Disappeared. The Imperium had spent centuries building those networks. They collapsed in less than a week. Nobody understood how. Nobody understood why. And that terrified people far more than direct attacks ever could. Because wars followed rules. This did not. At the same time, humanity continued behaving as though nothing unusual was happening. Earth's governments denied involvement. Human corporations continued normal operations. Civilian traffic moved uninterrupted. Universities remained open. Tourists visited colonies. The species supposedly threatening galactic extinction appeared strangely relaxed. The contrast drove Imperial analysts insane. One senior strategist finally voiced the concern nobody wanted to acknowledge. What if the humans aren't reacting because this is normal for them? The room fell silent. Because the possibility was horrifying. What kind of civilization considered this normal? What kind of species prepared for events centuries before they occurred? And more importantly, how long had they been preparing? The answer arrived unexpectedly. A research team investigating old human archives uncovered a forgotten recording. The footage was ancient, more than 180 years old. The image quality was poor. The speaker looked young, confident. Dr. Elias Kane. The recording appeared to be part of an academic lecture. Nothing unusual at first. Then Kane said something that froze every analyst watching. Most civilizations prepare for known threats. He smiled. That is why most civilizations lose. The audience laughed. Kane didn't. We should assume that one day an empire will arrive. He paused. We should assume it will be stronger than us. Another pause. We should assume it will win every conventional war. Someone in the audience asked how humanity could possibly prepare for an enemy that didn't exist. Kane's answer would later be replayed across the galaxy thousands of times. You don't prepare for the enemy. He said it so casually, as if discussing the weather. You prepare the enemy. The recording ended there. No explanation. No context. Nothing. Just those 4 words. You prepare the enemy. The phrase spread rapidly through imperial leadership. Nobody understood it. Yet everyone hated it. Because instinctively they felt there was meaning hidden inside it. Meaning they couldn't see. Meaning humans somehow could. Back beneath Antarctica, Maya Chen finally made a decision she had spent 40 years avoiding. She opened Kane's sealed file. The ancient encryption dissolved. A single document appeared. 1 page. 1 sentence. No more. Maya stared at it. Then read it again. And for the first time since the crisis began, she looked genuinely frightened. Because the document wasn't describing the Imperium. It wasn't describing humanity. It wasn't describing a war. It was describing something else entirely. Something Kane believed would arrive after first contact. Something he apparently considered far more dangerous than any empire. At the bottom of the page was a date. A date that matched the countdown hidden inside the mysterious signal. And according to that date, humanity had less than 18 months remaining. For nearly a full minute, Dr. Maya Chen did not move. The document remained open before her. The date remained unchanged. And no matter how many times she read the sentence above it, her mind refused to accept what it meant. Because Elias Kane had not predicted an invasion. He had not predicted a war. He had not predicted the Imperium. The Imperium was merely a variable. A distraction. A symptom. The real prediction was something else. Something far larger. Something that, according to Kane's calculations, appeared every time intelligent civilizations reached a certain level of development. The document called it only one thing. The convergence. Nobody in the room understood the term. Maya barely understood it herself. Because most of Kane's deeper theories had always been dismissed as mathematical speculation. Interesting. Brilliant. But speculative. Now she wasn't so sure. The countdown hidden inside the mysterious signal wasn't counting toward an imperial attack. It wasn't counting toward a battle. It was counting toward an arrival. And according to Kane's models, that arrival had already begun. Thousands of light-years away, the Imperium remained completely unaware. Their attention was focused entirely on humanity. On disappearing stations. On broken intelligence networks. On impossible predictions. On the growing suspicion that humans had somehow manipulated events long before first contact ever occurred. Then another report arrived. This one from an astronomical observatory. The observatory's purpose was simple. Monitor deep space anomalies. Track unusual gravitational events. Nothing military. Nothing classified. Which was why the scientists initially assumed their instruments were malfunctioning. The readings made no sense. Entire regions of space appeared to be changing. Not exploding. Not collapsing. Changing. Star systems that had been stable for millions of years were displaying subtle alterations. Orbital paths shifted. Energy outputs fluctuated. Physical constants drifted slightly outside expected ranges. The changes were tiny. almost invisible. But they were spreading. The scientists double-checked everything, then checked again. The results remained the same. Something was moving through the galaxy. Something enormous. And physics itself appeared to be bending around it. The report reached Supreme Chancellor Varric 3 days later. He dismissed it immediately. The Imperium had bigger concerns. Humanity remained the priority. Unfortunately, reality didn't care about priorities. 2 weeks later, a frontier fleet vanished. Not defeated. Not ambushed. Vanished. 37 warships disappeared during routine transit. One moment they existed. The next they were gone. No wreckage. No energy signatures. No distress signals. Nothing. The disappearance triggered panic. Entire sectors entered emergency status. Military readiness levels rose across the Imperium. Still, no enemy appeared. Still, no fleet emerged from hyperspace. Still, humanity denied involvement. And somehow that denial was becoming harder to dismiss. Because even the most paranoid Imperial commanders were beginning to realize something uncomfortable. Humanity might be dangerous. Humanity might be manipulative. Humanity might even be responsible for some of the recent events. But not these. Not all of them. Something else was happening. Something neither side controlled. Back on Earth, world leaders were finally brought into the deepest layer of Contingency Zero. Many arrived expecting military briefings. Instead, they found scientists, historians, mathematicians, behavioral analysts, entire teams dedicated to studying one question. Not how civilizations die, but why civilizations disappear. The distinction mattered, because throughout galactic history, hundreds of advanced civilizations had vanished. Everyone knew that. The Imperium knew it. Humanity knew it. Every species knew it. The common assumption was simple. Wars, plagues, economic collapse, natural disasters. The usual explanations. Yet Kane had spent decades studying the disappearances. And he had found a pattern. A terrifying pattern. The civilizations never disappeared randomly. They vanished at roughly the same stage of development. The same technological threshold. The same level of expansion. Again and again. Across millions of years. Across countless regions of space. The pattern repeated. And nobody had ever noticed. Until Kane. That realization had become the foundation of Contingency Zero. Not preparing for an empire. Preparing for what came after empires. Preparing for whatever had erased all the others. Meanwhile, inside the Imperial core, another impossible event occurred. The countdown signal changed. For months it had behaved predictably. Advancing steadily. Counting downward. Now it did something new. It transmitted coordinates. Only coordinates. No explanation. No message. Just a location. At first nobody recognized it. Then astronomers compared the coordinates against historical records. Every face in the room went pale. Because the coordinates pointed toward a dead region of space. A place known throughout the galaxy. A place every civilization avoided. The silent expanse. Thousands of years earlier, the expanse had contained thriving star systems. Trade routes. Colonies. Entire civilizations. Then something happened. Nobody knew what. Every inhabited world simply went dark. Exploration fleets sent to investigate never returned. Eventually, everyone stopped asking questions. Some mysteries were safer untouched. Now the countdown was pointing directly toward it. The implication was impossible to ignore. Whatever was coming, whatever Kane had predicted, whatever humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for, it appeared to be emerging from the silent expanse. And as the realization spread across both human and imperial leadership, a final report arrived. A small automated probe stationed near the edge of the expanse had transmitted its final observation before going offline. The image quality was poor. The distance immense. But the object visible in the footage was unmistakable. Not a fleet. Not a station. Not a planet. Something far larger. Something moving slowly through the darkness between stars. The last frame captured before the probe vanished showed only a silhouette. Yet that silhouette was enough. Because according to preliminary calculations, the object was approximately the size of a solar system, and it was heading directly toward inhabited space. The image spread through the highest levels of government within hours. Not to the public. Not yet. Only to those who carried responsibility for entire civilizations. And every one of them reacted the same way. Silence. Because there are moments when fear becomes too large for words. The silhouette occupied only a fraction of the probe's final transmission, yet its estimated dimensions were already rewriting scientific assumptions across the galaxy. A structure the size of a solar system should not exist. It should collapse under its own mass. It should tear itself apart. It should violate every known law of engineering. Yet there it was, moving, deliberately, toward inhabited space. The Imperium immediately dispatched reconnaissance fleets. Hundreds of ships jumped toward the edge of the silent expanse. The mission was simple. Confirm the sighting. Gather intelligence. Return. None of them returned. At first, commanders assumed communications interference. Then hours became days. Days became weeks. Nothing. Entire fleets simply disappeared. The same way the frontier stations had vanished. The same way countless civilizations had vanished throughout history. For the first time since the crisis began, humanity and the Imperium were asking the same question. What was out there? Unfortunately, nobody liked the answer. Because humanity already possessed fragments of it. Inside the deepest vaults of Contingency Zero, Kane had left behind another layer of predictions. Models so extreme that most researchers had considered them theoretical nightmares rather than practical forecasts. Yet every month, more of those predictions became reality. Dr. Maya Chen stood before a projection of the approaching object. Her team had spent years analyzing Kane's work. Now they finally understood what he had been trying to tell them. The object wasn't a ship. It wasn't a station. It wasn't even a machine in the traditional sense. It was an ecosystem. A moving civilization-scale structure designed for one purpose. Harvesting. The word made the room uncomfortable. Because harvest implied something simple. Something terrifyingly simple. Farmers don't hate crops. Farmers don't fear crops. Farmers don't negotiate with crops. They simply collect them when the time comes. And according to Kane's calculations, intelligent civilizations were the crop. The room remained silent as Maya displayed the historical data. Thousands of extinct species. Hundreds of vanished empires. Entire sectors that had gone dark. The pattern was unmistakable now. Every disappearance coincided with the appearance of similar anomalies. Every civilization reached a certain level of development. Then it vanished. The galaxy hadn't been a battlefield. It had been a field. And something had been harvesting it for millions of years. The revelation shattered assumptions humanity had carried for generations. Yet somehow the Imperium suffered the realization even harder. Because the Imperium's entire identity rested upon power. Strength. Dominance. Control. Those concepts lose meaning when confronted by something that treats civilizations as resources. Supreme Chancellor Varric understood that before anyone else. The Imperium could defeat enemies. It could conquer worlds. It could suppress rebellions. But how do you intimidate a force that has consumed civilizations older than your entire species? You don't. That realization spread rapidly through imperial leadership. And with it came panic. Governors began hoarding resources. Military commanders ignored central authority. Entire sectors started acting independently. The Imperium was beginning to fracture. Exactly as Kane's models predicted. Fear was doing what human fleets never could. Destroying the empire from within. Meanwhile, humanity made a decision that shocked everyone. Instead of exploiting the chaos, they opened communication channels. Not with governments. With ordinary citizens. Human broadcasts appeared throughout imperial space. Simple messages. No propaganda. No threats. No demands. Only information. Scientific data. Historical records. Evidence. Proof. Humanity shared everything. Every prediction. Every discovery. Every terrifying conclusion. Many imperial leaders begged citizens not to watch. That only made more people watch. Within weeks, billions knew the truth. And once billions know the truth, governments lose the ability to control the narrative. The psychological effect was immediate. For centuries, the Imperium had portrayed itself as the ultimate power in the galaxy. Now its people were learning that something far greater existed. Something that didn't even acknowledge the Imperium's importance. The resulting crisis was unprecedented. Recruitment collapsed. Production quotas fell. Political factions emerged overnight. Some demanded war. Others demanded evacuation. A few demanded surrender to the approaching force. Nobody knew what the correct answer was, because nobody had ever faced anything like this before. Then the countdown reached 12 months, and the signal changed again. This time it transmitted a sentence. A real sentence. The first complete message since the beginning of the crisis. The transmission appeared simultaneously across human and imperial networks. Every translation system produced the same result. The same 6 words. You have finally noticed US. The reaction was immediate. Fear transformed into something worse. Confirmation. Because mysteries allow hope. As long as the enemy remains unknown, people imagine solutions. The moment the enemy speaks, the illusion begins to die. And yet humanity's reaction remained strangely different. Not calm. Not fearless. But focused. As though they had expected this moment. As though this was merely another step in a much longer plan. Supreme Chancellor Varric finally requested direct contact with Earth. No conditions. No demands. No negotiations. Just a conversation. The meeting took place 48 hours later. For the first time since first contact, the leaders of humanity and the Imperium sat together. Not as enemies. Not as allies. Simply as survivors facing the same storm. Varric expected military proposals. Strategic plans. Perhaps even requests for cooperation. Instead, Dr. Maya Chen placed a single file on the table. "The war is over," she said quietly. Varric stared at her. Neither side had formally surrendered. Neither side had won. "What do you mean?" Maya looked toward the stars beyond the station window. Then she answered with words that chilled everyone present. "The war was never the important part." Varric frowned. "Then what was?" Maya hesitated. For the first time since the crisis began, genuine uncertainty crossed her face. Because even Kane had never fully solved that question. Then she opened the final section of Contingency 0. A section nobody had accessed before. And what appeared on the screen made every person in the room realize that the real crisis had only just begun. Because according to Kane's final prediction, humanity itself was the reason the Harvester was coming. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The conference chamber remained perfectly still. Human representatives, imperial officials, military commanders, scientists, strategists, all staring at the final prediction left behind by Elias Kane. The words remained displayed on the screen. Cold, unchanging, impossible. The Harvester does not follow civilizations. It follows humanity. Supreme Chancellor Varric read the statement 3 times. Then a 4th. Each reading made less sense than the last. "What does that mean?" he finally asked. Dr. Maya Chen looked exhausted. Not physically. Existentially. Like someone who had spent years carrying a truth too heavy to share. "We don't know exactly," she admitted. But Kane believed humanity isn't simply another civilization. The room immediately erupted. Military officers protested. Scientists argued. Imperial ministers demanded clarification. The noise continued until Maya activated the next file. The arguments stopped instantly. Because the screen displayed a timeline. Not of wars. Not of empires. Of disappearances. Thousands of extinct civilizations mapped across millions of years. At first the points appeared random. Then another layer appeared. human migration patterns, ancient exploration routes, first contact locations, colonization records. The overlap was horrifying. Every major extinction cluster existed suspiciously close to regions humanity eventually entered. Not immediately, sometimes thousands of years later, but always connected, always linked, as if something had been following humanity's path through history, waiting, watching, growing closer. A terrible realization spread through the room. Humanity had always assumed it discovered things. What if something had been discovering humanity instead? Meanwhile, deep inside the silent expanse, the impossible object continued advancing. Long-range observations improved daily, and each update brought worse news. The structure wasn't merely enormous. It was alive. Not biologically, not mechanically. Something in between. Entire continents shifted across its surface. Artificial stars burned within massive internal chambers. Sections reconfigured themselves without warning. The object behaved less like a machine and more like a thinking ecosystem. A civilization made entirely of itself. And it was accelerating. The countdown dropped below 10 months. Panic spread across the galaxy. Evacuation proposals emerged. Emergency alliances formed. Economic systems collapsed. Religious movements exploded in popularity. Entire worlds descended into chaos. Because for the first time in recorded history, everyone faced the same unavoidable truth. There was nowhere to run. The Harvester wasn't targeting planets. It wasn't targeting governments. It wasn't targeting species. It was targeting something else entirely. And nobody knew how to stop it. Then came the transmission. Not the countdown signal. Not another warning. A direct communication. The first ever received from the approaching entity. Every communication network in known space activated simultaneously. Billions watched. The screen remained dark. Then a voice spoke. Calm. Emotionless. Ancient. We have arrived. Nothing else. No threats. No demands. No explanations. Just those 3 words. Yet somehow they felt heavier than any declaration of war. Across the galaxy, fear reached its peak. And that was exactly when humanity did something nobody expected. Earth announced an operation. Not a defense. Not an evacuation. An expedition. 1 ship. 1 destination. Directly toward the Harvester. The decision triggered outrage. Imperial commanders called it suicide. Scientists called it reckless. Politicians called it insanity. The Harvester had consumed civilizations for millions of years. Now humanity intended to fly directly into its path. Supreme Chancellor Varric personally confronted Maya. "You're sending them to die." "No," Maya replied. "We're sending them to ask a question." Varric stared at her. "A question?" Maya nodded. "The one thing nobody has ever tried." For a moment, the Chancellor genuinely wondered if humanity had finally lost its mind. Then Maya revealed the final secret Elias Kane had left behind. Not a weapon. Not a strategy. Not a contingency. A theory. A single theory that had guided Contingency Zero from the very beginning. Kane never believed the Harvester was consuming civilizations. He believed it was searching for something. Humanity's greatest advantage wasn't technology. It wasn't military power. It wasn't intelligence. It was curiosity. Humans asked questions long after other species stopped asking. Kane's final theory proposed something radical. What if every civilization that encountered the Harvester immediately treated it as an enemy? What if nobody had ever tried to understand it? What if the entire galaxy had been repeating the same mistake for millions of years? Nobody knew if Kane was right. But humanity was out of alternatives. The expedition launched 3 days later. 1 vessel. 27 volunteers. No weapons. No military escort. Only scientists. Historians. Linguists. Mathematicians. And 1 message. A message intended for a being older than civilizations themselves. As the ship crossed the edge of known space, billions watched. The vessel became a tiny point of light against unimaginable darkness. Then it disappeared into the shadow of the harvester. Communication ceased. Hours passed. Then days. Nothing returned. No signals. No updates. No evidence of survival. Across the galaxy, hope began to die. Perhaps the expedition had failed. Perhaps Kane had been wrong. Perhaps humanity had simply sacrificed 27 people for nothing. Then, 7 days later, every screen in the galaxy activated. The image that appeared wasn't from the expedition ship. It wasn't from Earth. It wasn't from the Imperium. The signal was coming from inside the harvester itself. And the face looking back at the galaxy was human. A human nobody had seen in almost 200 years. Elias Kane smiled at the camera and said, "Good. You finally came." The transmission ended. For several seconds, nobody in the galaxy moved. Entire worlds watched in silence. Military command centers, government chambers, refugee shelters, space stations, factories, homes. Billions of eyes stared at the frozen image that had appeared across every network. Elias Kane, dead for nearly 2 centuries, smiling, speaking from inside the harvester. Then the transmission returned. The image stabilized. Kane appeared older than the recordings humanity possessed. Not much older. Just enough to make one fact immediately obvious. He hadn't been preserved. He had been living. The realization hit humanity like a physical blow. 200 years. 200 years inside the very thing that had haunted civilization for millions. Kane leaned forward. "Before you panic, I should clarify something." He smiled slightly. "The harvester is real." Across the galaxy, countless hearts sank. Then Kane continued. "But not in the way you think." The image changed. Behind him appeared vast structures stretching beyond sight. Cities. Civilizations. Species. Thousands of them. Some recognizable. Most not. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Because many of those species were believed extinct. Some had vanished millions of years ago. Others were legendary. Entire civilizations thought lost forever. Yet they were alive. Living. Thriving. Inside the harvester. Kane allowed several seconds for the shock to settle. Then he delivered the truth. The harvester has never destroyed a civilization. The galaxy froze. Every assumption, every fear, every prediction, shattered. Kane took a slow breath. What you call extinction was actually evacuation. Nobody understood. Not yet. Then the explanation began. Millions of years earlier, an event had threatened all intelligent life. Not a war. Not a species. Not an empire. The universe itself. Certain regions of space gradually became unstable as civilizations expanded and altered reality through advanced technologies. Eventually, entire sectors became uninhabitable. Stars failed. Physics degraded. Civilizations died. Again and again. Until one ancient species found a solution. They built the harvester. Not as a weapon. As an ark. A moving sanctuary capable of relocating civilizations before catastrophe reached them. But there was a problem. Every species interpreted its arrival as invasion. Every species resisted. Wars followed. Billions died. After countless failures, the architects changed strategy. They stopped explaining. They simply collected civilizations before the collapse arrived. The galaxy remembered disappearance. Not rescue. History transformed salvation into horror. And over millions of years, nobody remembered the truth. Except one person. Elias Kane. The chamber behind him shifted again. A new image appeared. This one terrified everyone. Because it showed the real threat. Not the harvester. Something behind it. A darkness spreading across the stars. Entire regions of space dissolving. Galaxies dimming. Reality itself unraveling. The room where Maya Chen sat became completely silent. Because now she understood Kane's final prediction. The countdown had never measured the harvester's arrival. It measured the arrival of the thing chasing it. The thing the harvester had been fleeing for millions of years. The thing now approaching inhabited space. Kane's expression grew serious. The harvester isn't hunting humanity. He paused. It's looking for help. The statement seemed absurd. Then the data appeared. Thousands of simulations. Millions of calculations. Probability projections. Every model reached the same conclusion. The ancient architects had exhausted every solution. Every possibility. Every civilization they rescued contributed knowledge. Technology. Ideas. Yet none had solved the problem. Until humanity. The room fell silent again. Not from pride. From disbelief. Kane nodded as though he expected it. Humanity's uniqueness was never strength. It was never warfare. It was never intelligence. Another pause. It was adaptability. The galaxy watched. Captivated. Because suddenly everything made sense. Humanity's endless curiosity. Its willingness to challenge assumptions. Its obsession with impossible problems. Its refusal to accept limits. Every trait that had confused alien civilizations now had meaning. The harvester wasn't following humanity. It had been watching humanity. Waiting. Evaluating. Hoping. For the first time in millions of years, it had found a species capable of producing solutions nobody else imagined. That was why Kane disappeared 2 centuries earlier. The harvester had contacted him. He had gone willingly. Not to save humanity. To buy it time. Time to grow. Time to become what the galaxy needed. The transmission shifted one final time. Kane looked directly into the camera. Directly at humanity. Directly at the Imperium. Directly at every species watching. The future isn't human. It isn't imperial. It isn't anyone's. His smile returned. Small. Hopeful. It's ours. Then the image changed. For the first time in history, representatives from thousands of civilizations appeared together. Species that had once been enemies. Species believed extinct. Species humanity had never even imagined. All standing side by side. Not under human leadership. Not under imperial rule. Together. A united civilization stretching across millions of years. The harvester had not come to end the galaxy. It had come to invite it. Months later, the Compact of Worlds was founded. Not as an empire. Not as a government. As a cooperative alliance dedicated to solving the crisis threatening reality itself. The Imperium joined. Humanity joined. Thousands of rescued civilizations joined. And for the first time in known history, the galaxy stopped preparing for war. It started preparing for the future. Years later, historians would debate the moment everything changed. Some pointed to the mysterious countdown. Others pointed to the arrival of the harvester. Many pointed to Elias Kane. But most eventually agreed on a simpler truth. Humanity did not save the galaxy because it was stronger than everyone else. Humanity saved the galaxy because when the entire universe saw an enemy, humans were the first ones who asked a question. And because of that question, billions of civilizations received an answer. An answer older than empires. Older than history. Older than fear itself. The future had never been extinction. It had always been invitation.